This week we are joined by vocal performance coach Juliet Russell. Juliet has worked across some of the biggest TV shows in the UK, from The Voice to Michael McIntyre's Big Show. But at the heart of her work is helping singers understand who they are, what makes them distinct, and how to communicate that through their voice, style preferences, and with confidence and clarity. In this episode, we are talking about how to spot, protect, and elevate artists' identity, how we can actually help them evolve in their musical life to align with their journeys and their interests, and a little chat on what is actually innate in the singer and what can actually be developed. And there's plenty of gold when it comes to understanding how Juliet translates voice science into practical, usable tools in the studio, from designing contemporary musical vocal exercises that sound like real music, and helping us to build our contemporary training toolbox aligned with what she believes are the pillars of contemporary vocal training. And if that's not enough, we also talk about Juliet's new app, Do Your Sing. So settle in, because Juliet Russell is coming right up. Juliet, welcome to the Singing Teachers Talk podcast. How are you and your fabulous hair?
Thank you very much. I'm really well. I'm actually having a bad hair day, hence it being up. But thanks, I appreciate it. And I'm really delighted to be here. I think you do an amazing job giving information out for singing teachers, and I love what you do, and I love the spirit of what you do. So I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, thank you, Julia. And if that's a bad hair day, I need to see you on a good hair day, because
Well, it was
fabulous.
just massive. So it's up.
If you had to summarise what's currently inspiring and driving you in your vocal work, what would you say?
Well, I think it's a really, really exciting time for music and for singing. And I think artists, genre is becoming looser and more collaborative. I think people are much more experimental with their vocals. So actually that becoming a more kind of more exploratory and a more courageous singer is kind of really in the air. And I think we can all benefit from all those exciting kind of movements that are happening. I think there've been some seminal performances and albums this year.
When you first meet a singer, how do you begin to identify it and help them to amplify what actually makes them unique?
To be honest, I think most people come with it. We all have the things in our voice that make us unique. But if you're really leaning into that, I think about it like a diamond. So, your unique things are like your diamond. That's the thing that's making you shine. But if you haven't got a setting for that diamond that really enhances it, then the diamond isn't going to gleam, because it's going to be all diamond and we'll get used to that. So I think it's really about really identifying what someone does beautifully and maybe originally, but also maybe building up those other aspects of their voice so they have more colours to paint with without losing any of their individuality.
When I look at artists like Sabrina Carpenter, she seems to be really popular at the moment, but she also had loads of albums before the ones that we probably listen to more of. What would you say about artists like that who are shifting who they seem to be across these albums, tuning into different parts of their interests and the sounds they want to make and the topics that they want to talk about to be more commercially popular?
The first thing I'd probably question is, are they doing it because it's to make them more commercially popular, or are they doing it because that feels like it represents who they are at this moment in time? And I think we have to let artists grow, and especially for someone like Sabrina Carpenter, who's a child star, she's had to evolve with people's expectations or memory of her in a certain way and become a woman. And we have to let people, especially artists who are kind of creative explorers, have that time to explore. And sometimes that's risk taking, sometimes that's about just digging deeper and deeper into that kind of road you're already walking down. And I think we have to sort of expect artists to change and evolve, because humans change and evolve. And I'm not the same person I was at 20, and nor should I be. So I think that evolution and supporting those changes and those explorations, whatever their degree of success, if it feels authentic and truthful to them at the time, then I'm here for it.
So how do you help an artist who is progressing in their own life, their age, their interests, in order to follow their authenticity?
A lot of the time when I'm working with an artist, they're nearly always songwriters as well. So I think a lot of the clues for where they need to go vocally are already in the lyric and in the work that they're creating. It's almost like we have habits, and when we have habits, they've served us. So we have to sort of say thank you to our habits. But over time, a habit can become something that starts to restrict us. rather than, not always. I mean, I meditate every day, so that's a healthy habit that doesn't restrict me. But some habits that I might have, like not going to bed early enough, for example, that starts to, it's good because I want to go and spend time with my friends and go out. But at a certain point, that's like making me tired the next day. So anything like that, that recognizing our habits and what we've built, honoring it, but then also saying, how can I still inhabit this space, but maybe open a window here or let that corridor lead to somewhere else. So I'm always about accepting what is, looking at where you want to go and looking at the most, I suppose, elegant, or for want of a better word, I don't want to say easy, but the least crunchy way of being at the front of your own change.
I feel like Lady Gaga is quite good at that because we've seen over the years her do her famously typical sound, and then she brought out that sort of big band bluesy album with Tony Bennett, and now she's revisiting the roots that she first came out with. And I think that's really great, the versatility that we see in artists and not putting them into, right, you sing rock and rock only in this way, off you go.
Yeah, because we're not like that about food and we're not like that about other things in our lives. So why should we be like that with our voices? Often with really, really successful artists, they're not just working in sound and voice, they're working in visual, they're working in imagery, they're working in connection with their fans, they're working in terms of their own story, they're working in terms of amplifying other people's lives. So it's a very complex thing to be an artist. It's not really just about the voice. And also, I think persona is a really important part of artistry, because for something you might want to embody a particular idea that you have that you then need to physicalize and own. And I think when you look at Beyonce's most recent album, she's been very deliberate in what she's saying kind of politically, and the kind of the music culture that she's bringing through with her, and she's moving through different musical cultures and then presenting it in a new way. I mean, in a way, that is the job of the artist, is to give us a new take on the world, or to make us look a little bit deeper, to make us come together a little bit more, to make us maybe walk in someone else's shoes for a little bit longer. Because for me, music, first and foremost, is serving our humanity and our connectedness and our need for each other. And I think, we're living in very challenging times in terms of who is valued, what is valued. So music and art have a really important purpose to bring us together. And I think that's why we should support artists, and why I want artists to feel the most themselves that they can be, because everyone's got their own unique gift to bring to the world. And if we can find it, we're very lucky. And if we can amplify it so that it actually helps others, then that's a massive gift to the world. When we see successful singers, we're seeing them at the level of mastery. What we're not seeing very often is their process. So I think what we have to remember as singers, especially as we're evolving, is we're in process. And we might want to get to mastery, and we will definitely get glimpses of mastery, but that's as we evolve. And there will be some bits we absolutely master early on, and there'll be other bits we have to maybe figure out and takes a little bit longer, and that's absolutely fine. And to remember that we don't have to be the end result, we can be the journey. And I think that's really important, to really enjoy process and to really put the things in place that help you to enjoy practicing and process.
Something that I was really interested in was a recent video Ray put out where she was working on sort of the production of Where Is My Husband? She'd done a performance in America, and she had a band behind her, a particular band. And then she went back and said, I wish that was on the original. And so she was jigging out about the production side of things.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a quick shout out to Joshua Alamu, who's her vocal coach, and because Ray really is at the level of mastery. I mean, she's incredible. And I think that's really lovely, because she says that in lockdown she taught herself to produce, but I think that's very important for creativity, to have that means of production, so that you're not always translating your ideas to other people, and technology does make that easier. But I think that's really interesting. She reimagines things, she rehears them. So she's evolving even with her own song. So a recording isn't even finite. It's like, I'm going to remix my own song because I've heard it like this now, and I love that song and I want another version. And that's great. That's just like artistry in action.
Could we do a little sort of case study? If I came into you and I said, hey, Juliet, I really would love to be in the music industry and I want your help, what sort of questions would you ask me in order to get to the crux of who I am as an artist?
Why do you want to do it? And what is it you want to say? What is it you want to offer? Because I think traditionally we've looked at singing as a look at me thing, but I actually think it's the opposite. It's a generosity. It's like, what can I give? And of course, we're working in an industry at the top level where, fame is the consequence or success and money is consequence. But I think most artists would do it anyway. There's conversations recently with Andre 3000 and Jack White from White Stripes saying the importance of small rooms. And I think even if you move 100 people in a small room, that is still putting something in the world that is of value. So I would say to you, what do you want to do and why? I would ask you what you think you like about your own voice and your own talent, because I think singers find that really difficult. They find it much easier to criticize their own voices. But I think finding what actually makes us, building on our strengths, I think is really, really important, because we all have them and we also have areas to build up. So I think I would generally what I try and do is get to know who I'm with and create a space where change can happen in a very supported way, and where movement can happen and where progress can happen.
For teachers who are working with artists who are gigging locally, maybe they have a residency at a particular venue, or they're wanting to find the venue that really suits what they're saying, how can they do that the best whilst sort of making money so they can keep doing it, but also not feel a detriment to their art when it's not being received by the people they want it to be received by?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes when we're at a certain level, and what I did myself when I was starting out as an artist was I'm working a job that's going to let me do my gigs in the evening. And it's I've done about 40 different jobs, but a particular one was I used to work at the Everyman Bistro in Liverpool. And so I'd my shift was like 12 to 4 and I'd come in, but it meant I could gig in the evening. I started quite late, so it meant I could fit it in. So obviously we're living in quite difficult economic times, so it's not necessarily that easy. But I think don't put the pressure on yourself to make what you love be the thing that makes you the money initially. And if it's not being received by the people who you want to receive it, maybe adjust who you want to receive it and just give your gift and see who comes and get feedback. We've all had bad gigs, even if you're amazing, you've had a bad gig, or even if, and so it's not to do with that, but you're actually learning your craft. So when you're performing live, I would say that's something like a vocal coach can't give you, like that experience of being on stage, pulling it back if the audience isn't receiving it, changing tack. That live kind of communication is something that I don't think can be taught. I think you just kind of have to put that time in and see how you go. And I think there's also, especially at the beginning, it's quite good to just set up your own gigs, like find a venue. A lot of venues, because it's a difficult time for venues, are happy with the bar take. They're not necessarily going to charge you to hire it. They'll be like, oh, you can get 100 people in, amazing. So you can look at it quite commercially. And I think it's really important that we have a little bit of an entrepreneurial flair about that. And we sort of think, what can I be doing? And to come back to our artist question early on, the most successful artists that I've worked with, they're the kind of people that are always upgrading themselves. They're always doing a little bit more. They're always kind of getting rid of the song that used to be their best song, because actually they've written 10 more since then. And if you listen to Ray recently, she was saying, after, she was having difficulty with her record label, she was like, I write 200 songs a year. That is commitment to your craft. And I think when you've got that level of talent and commitment, you're not going to fail because your output is huge. You're learning your craft. So I would just say, learn your craft. Like sometimes it takes time.
Really off topic, but I'm really interested to know, out of those 40 other non-musical jobs that you've had, which was the best and which was the worst?
Oh, good question. Well, I don't know if it's the worst, but it was funny because I was only 16 and I was like a tea lady. I had to like take the tea around at an office. So it was a holiday job, but I had to like literally go around the trolley and have a little white hat on. So that's possibly my worst. My best. My best was probably, I used to make clothes and sell them. So I used to really like doing that. Yeah, that was a really nice sort of creative thing to do. And I've worked on a few market stalls and things, and I like that. One of my first jobs was working on a market stall, and I like that kind of interaction of working with people and just meeting people and hearing their stories. So that's probably the best. Non-music ones.
My worst was the department store Debenhams, for many a reason, but it was bloody awful.
Right.
But I'm sure I could take some transferable skills from that place and put it into what I can do now. I can imagine the market stall and the clothes wearing and the interaction with people is something that you are able to transfer over into what you do as a coach now.
Yeah, because I think that like a lot of my coaching is because I'm very interested in people. And that's also why I sometimes like interviewing people as well. Like I find people endlessly fascinating and we have so much in common, yet we're all unique. So yeah, I do. I love people. I love people, even though I can be very, very quiet and just love being in my flat and reading and stuff. You learn a lot from people and you learn a lot in your interactions with people.
You've worked on some really big TV formats, The Voice UK, Building the Band, and Michael McIntyre's Big Show. And we've had the pleasure of speaking to some of your colleagues, John O'McNeill and Jay Ramage.
They're both amazing coaches and humans. Yeah, they're great.
Oh, we loved having them on here as well. From your perspective, what qualities do audiences instinctively respond to in these singers and artists coming through on these platforms?
That's a good question. I'm going to give you a broad headline, which I think my thing to artists is change the room, leave that room different to when you went in there. So that's the thing is like, does someone like change that atmosphere? Can everyone read what that person is communicating? So that's probably my umbrella for that. What I would also say is those shows are all very, very different, and the people that take part in those shows are very, very different. So with something like Building the Band, my role and Jono's role were also a bit different. Like we were arranging with the artists, so we're doing the vocal arranging, working very closely with them because they were all very creative. Obviously, when you're casting something from the States, the talent pool is huge. A lot of those artists were very, very developed already, had really worked on their craft. So for them, it was actually getting them to elevate what they do as the performances got bigger and bigger throughout the show. So there was a lot about the physical performance, which obviously that was choreography team, the staging team, and the creative team that also worked on that. Then something like The Voice, it's often people who don't anticipate, they're kind of doing it for the experience. They don't anticipate that the outcome might be more than that. So again, my advice would still be like, go and do what you came here to do, like sing that song with heart and soul, sing it in the way that only you can. Try and find your own unique take on something because these things are not karaoke versions. They have to refresh something or make something new. So even though a lot of them rely on covers of songs, is that how can you reimagine that? And so there's a creativity in that. And there was something like Michael McIntyre's Big Show. First of all, you have to like help them be calm after the shock because they've all been pranked and not knowing that's what's going to happen. And that tends to be much more sort of people who aren't expecting it, but maybe have never performed at that level before. So they haven't sung on a big West End stage with that level of production and that size of audience. So with all of it, I think it's about making people feel they can deliver the best that they can in that moment when the stakes are high. So there's definitely an element of calmness, preparation, but also helping them like achieve their excellence in that moment.
What do you feel that artists sometimes overlook when it comes to their creativity and their artistry?
I suppose I would encourage everyone to be a bit less hard on themselves. I think it's very easy to compare, whereas we can't really compare. We can only be ourselves and on our own journey. So really that, those that say, comparison is the thief of joy. And I think you can be inspired by people and you can be, but I think to sort of think, oh, they're doing this and I'm not, that doesn't really help us because we're all on our own paths. And I think what that might be is you might have longevity. Some people have a career that blows up and is huge, but it only lasts for 5 years, whereas you might have your career for 20 years at a less big level. So I think celebrate as you go and build as you go. Like we're evolving all the time, like I said before. So I would say like be a bit easier on yourself, celebrate what you do well, learn from things that don't go so well, but know that you're still on your path and it's still learning and you're still doing what you do because that's what you love and that's what you've decided to commit to.
Let's practice what we preach then, Juliet. What do you love about your voice and you as an artist?
What I love about my voice is that it feels really free, freer and freer as I get older, really, which is, and I feel like I'm also really not precious about mistakes and really in the same way. I mean, obviously I would acknowledge it, but it's just like if my voice does a little crack or if it's, so what? Was I being truthful in that moment? So the two things I like is my voice is very free. I love that my voice responds to me improvising. So I like the fact that I can, and partly because I was in an a cappella group called Sense of Sound with Jennifer John, Safina Aziz, and Perry Leen Hughes. So a lot of our composition was done in an improvised way. And my Tuesday tutorials are done in that way. And also I've done a sound healing course. So that led me to really thinking about my voice in a different way from performing. So I think I like the freedom I have. I like the fact I can improvise, and I like the fact that I can just be human and accept what my voice is doing that day.
Hi, it's Lynn here, popping by with a free resource. If you're a singer who wants to teach but sometimes feels a little unsure or overwhelmed, I've put together some free resources to help you feel grounded and supported as you take your next steps. Just check the link in the podcast description and you'll get an informed, practical PDF guide to help you get started, plus a few follow-up resources to help you feel less of a fraud and more confident in your teaching journey.
What do you like about yours?
Oh, I like my vibrato. I like when I am singing non-intense sounds. I quite like the intimacy that I feel it brings. And number 3, that I feel very aware of it. And I think I quite like that connection to something that's within us and you can't see, but it's all kind of very much sensation based. And I feel like I'm quite aware of what it's doing.
We should give that as a challenge to our listeners at the end of the podcast to write down 3 things they love about their voice and maybe stick it on the fridge and have a look at it and remember those things that make them special.
Absolutely. You mentioned in the beginning that there was some things that a vocal coach just can't help with, which is you experiencing being up on stage and doing your material. How much of the artistry is innate and how much can actually be developed?
I think definitely there are people who have some kind of talent or tone or something that's within them, but often those people have grown up around music. So they've already got that head start. So that's why I think we have to be really aware of who has opportunity, because it's not actually always about talent. Sometimes it's about, did you have that inspiring teacher? Did you have access to that information? Was singing an option at your school? There's probably, for every successful artist, there's probably lots more people that could have been there and maybe find it a little bit later, and that's absolutely fine because our journey is our journey. But I think really improving opportunity to be able to have access to the arts is massively important. So I would say like a couple of people who have won The Voice that I've auditioned early on, because there were auditions before the blind auditions, both of them I wrote down, this person's special. Like there's something about them and something about the way they shone, as in the way they came alive when they sang. And that was about like a very embodied, changing the room. So sometimes you can definitely spot it and it's a very immediate thing. Whereas other times it can evolve and grow. I think a lot of it is about exposure. Like a lot of people who are musical and successful have been around it from quite a young age. So, if you've been playing piano since you were like 8, and then by the time you're 18 you're actually pretty good at it, it's very different from someone suddenly finding at 18, oh, there's a piano in my college, whatever it is, or there's a piano in the local pub that I'm going to play. They've got 10 years on that person. So that exposure and opportunity is really important. I also think if it's really within you, you will find a way. You'll kind of find a way to make that happen, even if it's not necessarily going to lead you to your goals in a direct way. You'll just find a way to express yourself in the way that you need to express yourself. And also there's a lot of really good resources. There's a lot of good free resources now with social media. And I think that's a really good side of it, is actually you can look around and see, oh yeah, I like how that coach teaches, or I really love that song and I'm going to sing it, in this alternative key. So I think resources being more accessible is really helpful. So another thing I'd like to speak to around that is that even though not everyone is going to be a successful singer, really, we've evolved to sing and be musical. This instrument is incredibly versatile. We can all do it. It's part of being human to sing. It doesn't mean you have to do it or you want to do it. But if you do want to do it, 100% it's your birthright, because you have this incredible piece of equipment that serves you if you want to use it. And also our voice will really do anything. Like I always use the example, if a car was coming, stop! I wouldn't think, oh, my diaphragm. Some of those things, those extreme sounds we can all create, but they tend to be under duress or under exceptional circumstances. So remember, we can all express vocally kind of as we want to, really, given the kind of our preferences and given the sort of physicality of our voice. So I would just say it is your birthright, and however you choose to use it is up to you, really.
You've been a singing teacher, a vocal coach, now largely a vocal performance coach. How do you define the difference between these roles? There's a little bit of an argument, isn't there? Like, what is a singing teacher? What's a vocal coach? What's the difference?
Yeah, I've just written about this actually, but I haven't put it out yet. And I think to be honest, when I talk about this, I'm not saying it with any level of hierarchy or anything is better. I think we need all of it in the singing ecosystem. So it's not about one being more or less. I think a singing teacher, usually they have more knowledge than the singer. So they're sort of taking the singer through those kind of building blocks of learning what their voice can be and pitching more accurately, learning about their range, maybe singing songs better, feeling more confident, all those things. Whereas I think when you're in a vocal coach, it's kind of more collaborative, that the singer has mastered a certain level of things and then wants to progress. So it's a bit more like, I would say the collaboration is more. I'm not saying there's none in singing teaching, but I think when you come to coaching, it's kind of a little bit more of a partnership. It tends to be a little bit less directive and more about prompting. Obviously, there are times when you need to be directive because you know that actually if they change a thought around something, that will shift, or change something physical, that will shift. Then with vocal performance coach, the only reason I differentiate is because nearly all my work has a performance outcome. So whether it's someone's about to record, someone's touring, someone's about to perform on a television show, and part of that is being part of a bigger team. So you are working with the creative team, the styling team, the MD, the director of the show, you know, the artists themselves, the choreography team, everything. So I would say the performance part is, you know, it's going to be a performance outcome. So it's not kind of singing or coaching because of a general thing. It's about a very focused thing that's going to be happening generally. Basically, there's some problems around how we define coaching in itself and the difference between teaching and coaching. So, and I also think musical theatre singing, teaching and vocal coaching is different to what pop is. So I think we are kind of in need of a few more definitions around that. So that's my thoughts on it, but I'm quite happy to be wrong as well.
I can see that why they would be different. Thinking about being in musical theatre, and that's really where my teaching lies as part of like a higher education setting. So you are teaching the technical abilities, but also it's how to do an audition, or you know, vocal health, what to do, all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think you might be all three of those things within a day, depending on how varied your client base is, or depending on what the role is. And I wouldn't say I never am in singing teacher role, because there was someone that I've been working with quite closely who wasn't a singer at all, and then now is a singer in their performances. So that was definitely more about singing teaching and then coaching. But yeah, I would say generally I sit in that kind of vocal performance space, and that's where I'm getting a lot of joy at the moment. And again, that might change. There's something you said, oh, vocal health. And I think that's one thing we have to really, that's got to be fundamental to everything that we do, is like, but everything that entails, like being an artist can be, not always, but it can be challenging because it's not guaranteed. You know, you're having to be the main focus of everything, and if you're sick, you know, then the band doesn't tour, or you know, all that kind of things. So there's a lot of pressure on singers. So I think that understand that sustainability, that longevity, and finding as much ease as you can in your vocal expression is also really a crucial part of how I work with artists.
And what would you say on this sort of balance between when you are in the thick of performance and when you take a break, and how you sort of sew those together? So that, I say this because we spoke recently with Ema Tully from Neurotour, who works with a lot of performers in shows, and she was saying about how sometimes she will see dancers coming in with a rib flare because of the way they're up more, they're moving more, and they are creating particular lines in dancing. But then they might have a month where they're not moving as much, they're at home, they're waiting for their next contract, and they're sitting more, and so their sort of postural alignment is being seesawed between a rib flare and a protracted state. So in terms of the artist who's really going gigging and heavy on tour to then having a break, how do you balance that reset but also not get stiff?
I would say have a break. Because like that, it's a bit like you could have a training season. So in a similar way to an athlete, you would build up back again. Like you wouldn't go straight from like having a break to then going on tour again. Like you would build that back up. But I also think that time to reflect, to reset, because a lot of artists, they're away so much. So that maintenance, or that kind of having time with the people they love, and you have a life too, you know, and you have a duty to have a life too. So I'm very much a fan of having a break. And I understand that physical thing of you don't want it all to kind of lose your tone. But most people are not going to do that. It's like if you go to the gym, when you go on holiday, you're not going to just suddenly not do anything and then not go back again. You're going to maybe have a couple of weeks where you're a bit more chilled about what you eat and what you do. And then you're going to kind of pick it back up as you come back, maybe a bit more gently, and then go into it. So it's not about letting it all go. But I also think sometimes it's just good to not have that level of pressure and that level of performance all of the time. And also sometimes you just need to repair and relax and plot your next move and be fed creatively rather than giving creatively. So yeah, that would be my answer. It might go against what other people would say, but I think balance your life, have life too, and have a break if you need to.
How do you translate the amazing sort of scientific knowledge that you have into practical tools for artists who maybe don't have or need all of that?
Yeah, and there are some artists that really want to know it, and there's other people like, don't tell me the mechanics. It ruins the magic for me. So I think you have to be really led by what the artist wants. I think for me, it's about making that knowledge relevant and applied and practical. So an example would be, twang is a really useful setup, but if we're singing it like na 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 na, you're not going to sing like that in a song. So then if you take that twang and be like, do it first so you can get the note na 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 na, yeah 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 yeah. So I'm rolling the twang off and introducing it as I go higher, so I get the acoustic benefit, but I'm not in that kind of more yeah sound that some people say is twang. So I would kind of take the access point, then frame it in a way that is more usable. As you know, I've created an app with Do Your Sing, but also I do my Tuesday tutorials on Instagram. And the voice science is in there because I know it. But I think it's really important that you, and I said this the other day, like we're not as singers like all writing theses on it. We just want to know, like, how is that technique helping me to get my big note more easily? How is this warm up going to help me to get more sort of versatility and more movement in my riffs? We just need to know kind of enough for us to be able to achieve what we want to achieve vocally. So for a lot of my time is about democratizing that knowledge. That's really important to me, so that people have access to really good information, but equally making it really usable so that if you're not interested in it or you just want to know the result of it, that's apparent too. So in the app, I do like a video explanation of everything, then a checklist of what it's doing, so you understand like that actually those notes are what form a minor seventh chord, that kind of thing. So it's all embedded and all there if you want it, but equally if you just want to do the exercise, that's cool too.
Yeah, and you do that really, really well on your Instagram. Some of your videos, you pick riff patterns or moving patterns that aren't necessarily scalic, but which would sound like they're in a song that you would use, but there's a technical element to it. So there was one that I was watching where you were going from a M2 dominant place or head voice and then moving down into chest voice as a way to sort of smooth transitions and move between those coordinations. But it was very musical. It was, on an ooh phrase. You could imagine that singers would enjoy that more than maybe an octave arpeggio. Not that the scales that we do are wrong or bad or anything, but it's just another creative spin.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. It's a really lovely feedback. Thank you. And I think, like, of course, those scales, like the major minor scales, all those things are the building blocks of our pitch recognition and our relationship, understanding the relationship between notes and intervals and all that kind of thing. So it's not that it's wrong. It's just that music is so much more than that. And nearly always we're singing in pop music in a syncopated way, changing texture, changing register, all those things that you need to be able to do, because vocal technique now is so exciting and vocal expression is so exciting. The singers that I work with have probably done scales at least 500 times, as in major and minor scales. So for me, my job is to kind of broaden their musical vocabulary. And also there's lots of scales that are used in music, like a hexatonic scale, or different things that we might use, like pentatonic, like a blues scale, and also different time signatures. So my job is just to kind of keep it interesting, add a few more flavors in there. So I love like Phrygian mode. I just find it a really like earthy mode to use. So I think it's just useful to, again, paint with more colors, expand your vocabulary, understand that you can hear different things in different music. Understanding how you can achieve that makes it more usable. And that's all my knowledge that I want to have, and everything I want to share is to make singers be able to choose things in a way that supports their creative expression, like end of.
Let's say we're working with a singer who is really struggling to let go of thickness and yodel flip or get up into that head voice space. How could we take an exercise but turn it into something a little bit more fancy?
Yeah, so with something like that, if they're struggling to kind of find the sort of the thinner, M2 or whatever, then I would just do something more playful. Playing with sound is like, again, a number one thing. So I'd just be like, woo, or I'll just go like, boo, 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 boo. And then say, oh, where can you travel that down so it's a bit thicker? Boo, 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 boo. Yeah, excellent. So notice how you did that. Could you do that a note earlier? So I just do very short, little playful things. Go, that's the sound. Find it. And then you can be like, boo, once you've got the boo, 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 you just extend it, or you try different vowel combinations, you syncopate it, anything really. But playing with sound loosens everything up, and you think, oh, I can't sing a high note. Often we can't sing a high note if we're coming from underneath, because you're going like, oh, it's coming. But if you're like, hey, make it excited, like, hey, that kind of younger, like cheery voice, then your voice will naturally be a bit more lifted. I work with gestures quite a lot, so onsets and how we get into a specific gesture. So I would say I mainly use 4 of those, and one would be fry, which is, of course, a register in its own right, our M0. But if I'm tired, it's naturally going to show up in my voice. It's like, I heard, it's a kind of emotive quality. It's also really useful as a gesture into whistle tone, can add a bit of like, rock styling, as long as there's not a lot of breath energy underneath it, which for fry there generally isn't. The second one is that glottal, like, oh, 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 especially if you want to kind of get a clean start to something, or you're working with a singer who maybe finds it hard to access their thick folds, but also if you go, I am what I am, that am rather than I am what I am, which we don't need to smooth that phrase, I am what I am. Obviously, simultaneous onset is really useful, that balanced, you can start with a Y, you, getting that really smooth connection between breath and vocalizing. And I find also aspirate really useful, because that sigh, and that's really useful for singers that tend to work with a lot of pressed phonation. If they're working quite heavy, going to that slightly more aspirate space can be really, really useful for them. And it's a lovely texture. You don't want to be in there all the time, but to throw it in as a little flavor can be great.
As you were demonstrating there, you were using hand gestures as well as describing these vocal gestures. Do you find yourself doing that a lot as well, like using physicality and maybe emotional triggers?
Yeah, very much so. And I'm because sometimes even if you're doing a siren, like I think about it as being, if I do it to the side, forward. I don't think about it being like down, because if you're doing like a woo, singers can end up kind of being in that setup and then taking that all the way back. Whereas if you think like, wow, you're less likely to get the head drop, but also just kind of placing it. But I would say I overly gesture. I'm a very, very gestury person. But yes, I think physical prompts, sometimes imaginative prompts, emotional prompts, all of those things are really valid. And I think a metaphor, as long as you're being really clear that it's a metaphor, can be so useful. And actually letting singers find their own, because sometimes a singer will say something to you that is kind of technically, wrong. But if that's working for them, that's how they think about it. I think it's okay to go, oh, that's so interesting. I don't necessarily think about it but like that, but explain that to me more, and let them find their own language that makes sense to them too, because we're all different. Often when people are thinking about singing, or singers are thinking about singing, they're thinking about being good at singing. But actually what rewards us often is the emotional truth in something. So often when you ask someone to explain what that lyric is, or to paraphrase it, they'll be like, oh yeah, I woke up that morning and I was feeling really fed up, but then something happened, and all of those vocal cues and clues are there already. And it's just kind of finding it and being looser with it, and not thinking like your sound has to be good, because emotion isn't perfect. It's not. I mean, perfection is momentary, and it can exist absolutely in moments, but we're not here to be perfect. We're here to be honest, and to show up, and to connect, and to maybe amplify something or share something. So I think we can let go of a bit of perfectionism around singing.
Could you take us through a few approaches to technical training that you feel are like pillars to the contemporary genres that might help singing teachers in the studio space?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think in terms of warming up, a lot of us use sort of SOVTEs, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, and I think they're kind of cross-genre, everything from classical to musical theatre to pop and all those things. Those kind of vocal efficiency exercises work across the board. I think about vocal warm-up as in two ways. Like, first of all, it's that efficiency, checking in through the range. It's great for me to be able to track people's posture, listen to any parts of their voice that maybe don't feel as balanced, all that kind of thing for that. But then once I get into the training, I think about making the vocal exercises that I do, the warm-up exercise that I do, really fit for purpose for the singers I'm working with. So something like a really simple hum, like a fourth, I'd add like a little bit of syncopation and movement, because in pop singing, you're using these kind of things all the time. So an exercise that you can make a kind of a very straightforward exercise a little bit more interesting just by the varying the intervals that you use, adding a bit of syncopation. So I would say that twang for me is probably a pillar in pop training, because you can get so much sort of acoustic bang for your buck without necessarily belting, and it can be really useful for that, adding dynamism in a kind of, because it happens above vocal fold level, it's often feels better for singers and a bit safer. Pillars, I would say, are vocal health, dynamic vocal choices. For pop singers, a range of voice qualities is really, really important, because we're not kind of singing in our mix all the way through. I would say that warm-ups are always kind of quite about cleanness and balancing, but actually pop singing can be really scruffy. Like, we'll definitely use like a vocal fry and maybe a bit of breathiness, and that's fine. Whereas sometimes if you're being a bit purist about those kind of things, you might be like, oh, breathiness isn't good for the voice, or that fry isn't good for the voice. But actually, if it's part of your vocal styling and you're doing it safely, it's absolutely fine. So I would say that some of the pillars are about versatility and flexibility. And I mean that in terms of being able to kind of have lots of access to voice qualities, but also being able to riff and be flexible, because riffing is such a part of so many genres now. Having that flexibility is really, really useful. So dynamism, definitely. Access to lots and lots of different voice qualities, understanding the difference between registers and however you think about mixed voice, and all those little vocal ornamentations. So I would say things like vocal fry, breathy offsets, a little cry, a little flips, whatever you want to do. We need to be helping our singers be able to find these choices. So that's beyond warm-up. That's more about technical development or styling or flavoring. But those are the things I'd say that maybe we, as I really use that sort of as contemporary pop teachers, we really need to be thinking about flavor, because artists have, especially successful artists, they have a very unique vocal signature. So how can we help our singers work with what they've got that's already unique to them? But also now when we listen to genre, like there's so much genre fusion, so many artists are traveling between different genres or doing collaborations that require them to be different. How can we find all those colors to paint with while retaining our vocal identity? And I think that's really where we need to be sitting right now.
How would you say that singing teachers could help singers to develop being able to pop in a riff because it felt stylistically appropriate or emotively appropriate at that time without panicking?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. There's a few things there. So improvisation can feel scary, because especially if you've been taught to sing things a certain way, and especially with something like musical theatre, where there's often, you do have to honor the score. So I think there's two things there. I say sometimes it's really, really useful to listen to a riff and do it like the original artist, because it's teaching you a different type of musicality than you might necessarily lean into yourself, because everyone does those differently. And just a quick aside, I'd say, like, when you listen to Beyonce singing on flamenco and how she's using her riffs and using it in quite a country thin fold style, that's really, really interesting. So she's kind of really, in that particular album, really moved on how she would habitually do her riffs, or how she would, so there's lots of movement for that. But I think improvisation is an essential skill, and you have to kind of get it wrong first of all. There's no kind of way around it. Like, if I'm recording something, I'll be like, I'd sing it and be like, oh, that went a bit wonky. Oh, but there was a really good little bit in there. Let's try it again. So I would have that ability to play, learn what your kind of go-tos are and what you can do well, but then develop up those other skills. So have a little play with it. Maybe it'll go a bit wrong, but there'll be a seed of an idea in there that's actually really exciting. So quite often I'll do like call and response riffs with singers just to get them into it. And then we might just play some chords and go, okay, just do one that feels like you, or give them a phrase and say, okay, play around with it. So I think that play and that experimentation and that exploration is a huge part of building people's confidence. And, you know, I have a phrase which is strong and wrong, which is like basically just go for it and we'll tidy it up after. Like there's something in the being bold. And I think developing that kind of calculated risk as a singer, because performing is risky. Performing takes courage. Singing takes courage. So encouraging those tiny, like out of comfort zone things are actually building the resilience and the artistry of your singer. So, you know, I always say that I make mistakes all the time. You know, I might demonstrate something and I was like, oh, you know, it came off that a bit weirdly, or it's okay. You know, we're not here to be perfect. We're here to be communicating an emotional language through music.
Hey you! If you're enjoying the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations and valuable insights from experts across the field of voice. By subscribing, it means we can continue to do that. You'll never miss an episode, and you'll be helping to spread the word to other singing teachers, vocal coaches, and overall voice nerds. So subscribe to this channel now and just watch your teaching grow. You mentioned that funky word mix, and you mentioned however you think about it. How do you think about it in terms of contemporary vocalizations?
So I think about it as, in a way, a slightly philosophical thing. Say I've got an exercise like, this is how I mix my voice. This is how I mix this is how I mix. Really, what I'm doing is I'm getting someone to go lighter. So if I do it higher, this is how I mix my voice. This is how. What I'm doing is deliberately kind of being thicker, lower, and lightening the sound as I go. Now, if I were to mix it even more, like, this is how I mix my voice, I'm still not in thin folds, but I'm mixing in a very, very different way. So I think what we definitely know is there's a transitional area between our thick folds and our thin folds, or our M1 and M2, where we have choices about the timbre or the voice quality that we use. So sometimes that's to do with vowel modifications. So if I sing a siren like an oh, that oh, what I'm doing is planning my journey. If I was to stay in that oh, and then it would flip at some point. So what I'm actually doing is working towards the point that I want to go, and that's in reverse as you descend. Now, when I'm applying that to phrases, I'm often thinking about a pivot point. So a good kind of contemporary example is, I would like a ring, I would like a ring, I would like a diamond. You know, you don't hear Ray flip, but she's like, ring, I would like a ring, I would like a diamond ring. The timbre changes as she goes down. So for me, that I would like a ring, I would like, but like I'm in a thicker place. So it's finding those little, where do I need to transition to make that seamless? So really, I think about mix as, if I'm in thick folds or M1, I think about it as a lengthening that's going on before I've truly transitioned into thin folds. For me, there's definitely a choice around whether it's TA dominant or thyroarytenoid dominant, thick fold dominant or thin fold dominant. So that, how light are we going? And I think the way that voice science understands it is we're still in our M1 register, but we can play around with quality. And I actually think you can bring thin folds down quite a lot lower, and you bring thick folds to a certain point. But for me, I would say mix to about a G, but beyond that G, I've got to be in thin folds for me. So it's learning about where does that sit for you, and where's your absolute point that you can still kind of fake it till you make it. And that's why I find twang really useful, because that like nyan 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 nyan. You know, I'm going right through my range on a twang. You can't really hear the transitional flip, because partly because I'm planning my journey, but partly because that bright acoustic is helping me. So there's lots of little tips and tricks you can use to find a transition, which is really what we're looking for, is either a wonky transition, because it's fine to change registers in a really audible way, but sometimes you want to mix, as in you want to blend your sound so that transition feels more seamless.
So if there was one tool that you would say for singing teachers of the contemporary genres to absolutely make sure and they have in that bag that they take to the studio, the metaphorical bag, if you like,
Yeah.
what would that be?
I think the tool is outside the toolbox in that I would say listen to contemporary music, listen to lots, listen to what's going on, because you almost, as a vocal coach of contemporary singers, particularly if they're artists, you almost need to think like a vocal producer. You need to think like, oh, how do we get that tone? So I would see the thing that's informing your toolkit is knowledge of contemporary styles. So that's what I would say. And I think in my toolkit, I couldn't give you one. Really, it's about, because there's no like one size fits all. So I might have a singer. I did a masterclass at the weekend and we were talking about an aspirate onset and how to work with that basically. But there was a singer there who naturally had a very aspirate onset. So it's like, how do we then get more vocal fold closure for her? So it's really like, who are you working with? What are their goals? How can you get them there in a way that feels aligned to how they think and work and how they like, what the things about they like about their voice. So I would say really it's about having a vast toolkit and building it up.
It might be a really tricky question to answer, but for you, if you had to give 5 artists that you would recommend us listen to, because sometimes when you go out there and you listen to the radio and you put on Spotify and you're just overwhelmed with the amount of amazing music that you could have access to, it gets a little tricky to kind of pin down something and listen to it and know if you're kind of in the right zone.
That's a really, really good point. And I think who I would say is absolutely giving us a masterclass in vocals right now is Ray. She's absolutely like how she uses her verses like a rapper. She uses all different voice qualities. Her backing vocals will be often be in a different register to her lead vocal. I would say listen to Rosalia's album because she's mixing classical. She's got lots of guest vocals. She's singing in 13 languages. It's really like it's expanding what pop music is right now. An artist I go back to a lot is Sam Smith because they have really traveled their genre from being very much a ballad singer into being a very different type of singer. And the way they're able to use lots and lots of different voice qualities, especially I would say Unholy with Kim Petras. There are so many voice qualities on that song. I'd probably listen to Ordinary by Alex Warren at the moment because the way he uses his voice and the way the backing vocals are shaped is very epic, and it really takes us on a dynamic journey from that real speech quality to kind of a big kind of epic owning his space quality. And another singer who always gives us a lot of value, I'd say, is Bruno Mars.
Oh my god,
because
yes.
He's got so much soul, but also he's got little quirks and he's kind of able to have that lineage between kind of retro sounding to contemporary sounding. So the thing to say about Bruno, though, is his kind of biggest notes often sit higher than most male transitions. So don't be afraid to kind of play around with key with that. But they're probably a good starting point just right now. I mean, you can never go wrong with Beyonce either because she's an absolute Olympian. But I love SZA as well. I mean, so many. I think Benson Boone's another one who's kind of almost accessing that kind of Queen type stuff. You know, yeah, I've given you more than 5, but there's some kind of good starting points.
Oh no, that's really useful because sometimes we want that direction to be able to find contemporary music that musical theatre performers can take to auditions that seem relevant for, say, the Moulin Rouges that are out there and the Hamiltons. And
absolutely. And if you listen to Wicked with Ariana and Cynthia, they are bringing a lot of pop technique to those musical theatre songs. And so that's kind of sitting in a really interesting spot because it's definitely musical theatre, but they're bringing other elements into that. And I find that really interesting. And I think it's such an exciting time for vocals and for music, you know, character, versatility, courage, bravery, bold, creative choices. You know, that's where we're sitting right now, which is wonderful and all backed up with really sustainable techniques that you can perform with and take that on the road if that's what you need to do.
You mentioned your app and congratulations. Do Your Sing. Tell us about that. How did it come about?
I suppose it came out of partly the Tuesday tutorials, which I started in lockdown, because I always had personally found social media a little problematic, as in you sort of feel like you're showing off when you're saying, oh, I've been doing this. And whereas actually when I reframed it, and because obviously lockdown was a tough time for singers, but obviously for lots of other people, that thinking about it as what can I give instead of what can I show changed my relationship with it. And that's why I sort of talk about generosity and artistry. And I think part of the app is to democratize the knowledge, because I've been doing what I do for decades. Obviously, I've learned as I've gone along, but I think I'm sort of in a place with what I've learned that it's in a good position to share, because it's backed up with industry experience, a desire to actually contribute, and as well as voice science. So it's kind of that with stylistic awareness. And I also think sometimes, because even though now CCM, like commercial music pedagogy, has been around for about 50 years, I still think there's quite a lot of hangover of classical teaching, and not in a negative way, but like the bigger is better when it comes to breath. Now, obviously for classical singing, you're often, it's a generalization, but singing long open lines that are legato, big open vowels. But when you're singing pop, you might be singing 2 words before you've got space to take another breath. So, and it's a much more variable requirement. And I think vocal artists currently are required to be more versatile than ever before. So it takes you through 4 main sections. It's got warm-up, workout. So warm-up is obviously that preparation and that really important part of vocal health, but also warming up the whole of your voice and range. The workout is more about building your creative choices, your vocal stamina, your riffs, your versatility, like identifying different registers, all that kind of thing. Then the section I'm really excited about is the vocal effects section, which is things like little embellishments like vocal fry, or like you mentioned falsetto flip earlier. So there are these things we can hear on records, but we don't necessarily know the pathway to finding them. So they sort of break that down on how you can find it. And then, of course, cool down. And that's another thing that I think a lot of singers forget about. Lots of people know about warming up, but less about cooling down. But that, especially if you're doing a lot of heavy lifting vocally, or if you're touring, that resetting and rebalancing is crucial. So I suppose really what I wanted to create was a creative vocal toolkit for singers of contemporary styles. So it's for people who already know the basics, but really want to get to that level of mastery. And there's like playlist functions, so you can choose your favorite exercises or the things you feel like you need to work on the most. There's little scheduling reminders. So it's really about having a vocal coach in your pocket that you can be like, oh, how do I do this? This is how I do it. This is my warm up. I've got this gig coming up. I need to be able to hit that B flat really powerfully. What do I need to build up to? So it's designed to be useful for serious singers who want to get better, working singers, whether they are gigging singers or touring artists, and artists who already have their individuality, but maybe want to kind of build up their consistency, their vocal health, and their creativity and versatility.
When you've put in the exercises that hit certain technical elements, how have you been able to target a generalization rather than the individual voice that we might not necessarily be able to put one size fits all onto?
So I think you're right. Obviously, in a vocal coaching session, it's very bespoke, and you're working with that singer in a very specific and individual way. And that's why I sort of talk about my coaching being artist-centered, because the singer that I'm with is at the center of my practice at a time in my process. So when it comes to the app, what I've really done is distill some of those things that I've seen coming up again and again with singers that generally will help you to make the most of the range that you have, and to explore it in a way that helps you to be more creative and expressive, to work on your vocal phrasing, to work on different textures, different scaling patterns, all that kind of thing. To try and sort of cater for lots of different voice types. Every vocal exercise has 2 keys and also octaves. So it's not going to be like an individual singing lesson, but it's like going to be like a really good masterclass.
You've mentioned how you've designed it for the contemporary singer, and a lot of your work is based in that field. For musical theatre singers who like the pop singing compared to maybe some of that contemporary legit stuff that they might find themselves studying, how do you help them to find their pop qualities?
Musical theatre performers are required to be incredibly versatile, because they might be singing in a legit style for one musical, but having to really lean into pop styles for another casting or another audition. So I would say absolutely that pop styling is relevant to musical theatre singers too. And if you look at singers like Jessie J, she came from a musical theatre background and then has merged as, that sort of soulful R&B influence in her riffing and all those kind of things. So we don't need to have these really clear like separations. We need to understand what the requirements of style are, but also understand when to pull it in and when to pull it out. So a lot of the app is around vocal styling for you to choose to use however you want to use it. And it's fun. It's fun to like explore what your voice can do. And also I'd say from my point of view, I've studied, like I'm not a classical singer, but I've studied classically because I want to understand what that is and what that can bring to my voice. And so I think that having that kind of quite open, it's a bit like if you're a cook, you know, you don't necessarily have to follow the recipe. You need to know the recipe, but also you might want a little bit more pepper or a little bit more of something else. And that's fine. But having those ingredients at your disposal means you can make the recipe how you want to make it.
What's the process of actually developing an app like?
It was hard, but what I loved, it was very creative for parts of it. So I wrote all the music for it, obviously recorded all the vocal tracks, and then I kind of looked at where the gaps were and I was like, oh, could I have a bit more of this? And we are adding to it as we go as well. So it'll become this evolving kind of resource for singers. My husband learnt to code, so he did all the sort of technical aspects. So probably a hard thing was him having to deal with the way that I work because I'm really like free ranging and then doing things. And also during it, I'd started doing it in 2023, started developing it then. And then I had a really lovely job with Kool and the Gang working on their touring show. So I had to park it because I knew that I couldn't do that. And I was the creative director of that show. So working with the lighting team, obviously all the musicians who are incredible, their incredible legacy and backlog. So I knew I couldn't do those two big projects. So I did have to put it to one side, but I was still very much, you know, making little voice notes every so often. And how I tend to work, like even with my Tuesday tutorials, they're very rarely planned. It's either like I usually do them on the Tuesday morning and be like, okay, what's coming up this week, or what am I feeling like? So that working quite spontaneously has some great aspects to it, but that discipline needed to do an app. I was having to rein myself back in. Also realizing which exercises were really tricky for me to sing. And realizing that actually, why is that? And how can I make that easier for the singer? Or how can I work on my own technique? Because I know I really want to do this. So when I was recording the exercises, I was very conscious of my intention to put love and joy into the exercises so that people weren't getting my kind of pressure of getting it right. They were getting me feeling free and feeling open so that when you're listening to it, hopefully that comes across, that there's a kind of an ease to it, even though they weren't all easy technically, that there's a kind of letting go and flowing within that. And that's process. You know, you practice something, you build it up, and then you have it. And I suppose in terms of the app, there is a vocal performance in there, in that I've worked on these exercises and then delivered them. And that's what I suppose I'm asking singers to do. So it's a process that I've also done myself in building the app.
What's the feedback been like so far with people who have used the app?
The feedbacks are so good, and I'm really happy about that, because my biggest thing is I want it to be useful, and I want it to get great knowledge out to singers in a way that is fun and helps them, that makes a difference to their singing and what they can achieve vocally. So that's been really good. It's been lovely feedback. I mean, it's only been out properly since beginning of December, really. It was kind of softly out, but I've only just started kind of talking about it and advertising it in December. So it's been quite nice to just actually let it be what it is. I did it with good intention and put my heart and soul into it. And I also think for everyone, we can only be what we are. So I think if people are drawn to it and they feel like that's a good fit for them, I'm really, really happy. But also, I'm really happy if people think that they're getting what they need elsewhere. I don't think, I think there's room for everything and everyone. If they're giving really good information that people find helpful and creative and inspiring, then more the merrier.
Yeah. Are you doing a hard launch for it?
I don't know if I'm going to do a hard launch. I might. Finishing it was such a big thing because I've been working on it for 2 years, obviously on and off. So then I almost didn't have the energy to launch it. And when the week I wanted to launch it was actually in July, and everything shut down. Like my emails went off, my website went off. It was just like, okay, this is not the right time. I don't know. It feels like now is the right time for it. And I feel very comfortable with me saying what it does and what it is. And I think I had to really kind of walk into my own, what is my truth around it, and what am I sharing that's really truthful and authentic to me. And now I'm in that place. It's out there. I hope people love it, and I hope it's really helpful, but it is what it is, and I've done it.
Where can we find it? And is there a subscription price or anything like that?
It's in the App Store only at the moment. It may or may not come to Android. I probably will. So the subscription price is generally $7.99 a month. And that was kind of priced because of the quality and the amount of work that's in it. And I want it to be something that singers use, like, kind of at least 3 times a week. That's super useful for them, so that it's kind of worth their investment in it. But also we are going to do a lovely best discount. So yes, make the most of that. So for best subscribers, it will be £4.99 for the year. So even if you get it and it goes up during that first year, your price will stay the same.
Oh, that's amazing. And thank you so much, Juliet. That's a really kind offer. And the code for that, we'll pop that in the show notes for our viewers and our listeners. On just a final parting question, what's the advice that you would give, first of all, to the contemporary singer who wants to emerge or wants to continue developing, and then second, to the teacher working with contemporary artists?
Lovely questions. Okay, I would say for the contemporary artist, I would be inspired by everything that's going around, but also filter it in your own special way. So like take those influences and then kind of put it in your own magical blender, and something different will come out just because you're a different human and a different vessel. I would also say play, explore, get creative, take risks, not with your vocal health or your lifestyle, but take risks as in try a part of your voice that you didn't know you could do. You know, if your expression relies on you going, oh, you know, like play with it, see what you can do and go, oh, actually that served the emotional purpose for that, and that's great. So get really truthful about what your emotional intention is, because a lot of technique will be revealed. Look after yourself vocally as much as you can in terms of your well-being and mental health. You know, your voice is in a body, in a human. You want longevity with your voice, and you want it to be able to serve you when you want it to serve you. And working with people like Jennifer Hudson and Sir Tom Jones, I've really been inspired by how they are always ready to sing. They're never sort of shy away from it. They step into it all the time. So as a singer, be ready to sing, whatever that means for you. For singing teachers, I would say, again, be inspired. There's so much amazing music and amazing vocal performances now. And maybe listen outside your usual genre, because genres are expanding, and with collaboration, there's a lot more kind of cross-fertilization of genre. The other thing I would say is start to think like a vocal producer. Like analyze when you hear a singer, think, what are they doing? How are they getting that sound? How can I find that? What's an easy way of getting that? How can I use that as a little access into this, and then what would follow it? You know, working with prompts, tiny little things that then open a gateway to play, exploration, support. And I find for me working with singers is it keeps me relevant. Like it keeps me really like on the button in terms of the new music that's coming out. So I'm constantly reinvigorated and re-inspired. And that's great. You know, you don't need to be stuck in an era or stuck in a genre. You know, you can really like be informed. That's a brilliant thing about that. The world we're living is we can be informed by lots of different artists, lots of different styles, lots of different approaches, but add our own special sauce to the mix.
Oh, Juliet, it's been so lovely chatting. You're so coherent and very zen. I feel like I'd like to come and live with you for a while and feel your zen.
My husband would not say I'm zen. He'd say that I leave clothes around the place, and he can always see exactly what I'm doing because the cupboard door is open. But I do try and bring a space. I mean, I'm a long-time meditator. I've been meditating for 18 years, and I spend lots of time in nature. I spend a lot of time doing music, all of which are things that I love. So I think I'm lucky that I've definitely become more calm as I've got older.
Juliet, where can our listeners and viewers find out more about you, follow you, come to your Tuesday tutorials, get the app, continue learning from you?
Yeah, I mean, you can on Instagram, usually on a Tuesday. I'm doing quite a few masterclasses coming up this year, so you can come even on person or online. Most of them are going to be in person. Obviously, the app, and we're going to be adding to that as we go through the year. But if you ever want to just say hello, or just do. I mean, I'm very always open to meeting interesting artists, coaches, and I think, you know, we do the work that we do, I think, in partly to enrich the world. So kind of keep reminding yourself why you do what you do, and keep reminding me why I do what I do by also bringing your brilliant selves to whatever you're doing.
Juliet Russell, thank you so much. You're a gem.
Thank you so much, Lexi. You've just been so brilliant and so open, and I appreciate all the work that Bass does and everything you put in to make this podcast a success, because I know it's not easy, and you make it look easy, and it really helps people get great conversations, great information, so we can all be in this together.
Oh, thank you.